I still remember that December night like it was yesterday. The city lights twinkled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the high-rise office building. Sarah's company always threw the most extravagant Christmas parties, but this one felt different. Maybe it was the jazz quartet playing softly in the corner, or the way the normally sterile conference rooms had been transformed with garlands and twinkling lights. Or maybe it was the way my wife of 7 years seemed to shine just a little too brightly whenever her boss was around. I stood near the bar, nursing my second whiskey of the evening, watching Sarah work the room. She looked stunning in her emerald green dress, her blonde hair falling in soft waves over her shoulders. As the marketing director for one of the city's top firms, she commanded attention effortlessly. I used to love watching her in these moments, proud to call her my wife. But lately, something had felt off. It started with the late nights at the office. Then came the constant mentions of Michael in our conversations. Michael thinks we should take the campaign in a different direction. Michael loved my presentation today. Michael says, Michael this, Michael that. At first, I brushed it off as professional admiration. After all, Michael Anderson was everything I wasn't in the corporate world: polished, charismatic, and ruthlessly ambitious. I'm just a software engineer who prefers jeans to suits and coding to networking. Sarah had begged me to come to this party, insisting it was mandatory for all senior staff and their spouses. "You'll charm everyone like you always do," she'd said with that smile that still made my heart skip a beat. Now, watching her laugh at something Michael said, I wondered if I was just being paranoid. But I couldn't ignore the way his hand lingered on her lower back, or how her eyes seemed to sparkle when he leaned in close to whisper something in her ear. "Your wife's quite the star here," remarked Tom, one of the junior associates. There was something in his tone that made my stomach clench. I caught the sidelong glances from other employees, their polite smiles tinged with what looked suspiciously like pity. The jazz quartet started playing "Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas," and I decided I needed some air. Making my way through the crowd, I noticed Sarah was no longer in sight. Neither was Michael. My chest tightened as I scanned the room, trying to appear casual while fighting down the rising panic. "Looking for Sarah?" asked Jessica, one of her colleagues. I nodded, forcing a smile. "I think she went upstairs with Michael. Something about reviewing year-end reports." Year-end reports. At a Christmas party, the elevator ride to the executive floor felt like an eternity. Each floor number that lit up matched the increasing tempo of my heartbeat. The executive floor was eerily quiet compared to the festivities below. I walked down the dimly lit hallway, past empty offices and conference rooms. Then I heard it, a muffled laugh, followed by what sounded like a low moan. My hand started shaking as I approached Michael's office at the end of the hall. The door was closed, but light spilled out from underneath. I could hear rustling sounds and whispered words I couldn't quite make out. Taking out my phone, I opened the camera app. If I was wrong, I'd apologize later. If I was right, I tried the handle. Locked. Something snapped inside me. Without thinking, I stepped back and slammed my shoulder into the door. The cheap lock gave way with a crack, and the door flew open. What I saw inside shattered my world into a million pieces. Sarah was perched on Michael's desk, her dress hiked up, lipstick smeared. Michael had his shirt unbuttoned, his tie hanging loose around his neck. They froze like deer in headlights, their guilty expressions illuminated by the city lights streaming through the window. "Jack," Sarah gasped, scrambling to fix her dress. "I can explain." I let out a hollow laugh, making sure my phone was still recording. "Explain what, Sarah?" "How you're reviewing year-end reports." Michael stepped forward, trying to regain some semblance of authority. "Look, Thompson, this isn't what it looks like." "Really?" I said, my voice dangerously calm. "Because it looks like my wife is screwing her boss at the company Christmas party." Sarah started crying, mascara running down her cheeks. "Please, Jack, let's just go home and talk about this." "Talk about what?" I spat. How long you've been sleeping with him? How many other late nights at the office were spent right here on this desk? Michael's face reddened with anger. You need to leave, he said, attempting to sound authoritative despite his disheveled state. Or what? I challenged. You'll fire my wife? Oh, wait, you're already doing that, just not in the professional sense. Sarah flinched at my words. Jack, please, she begged. We can work this out. I looked at her, really looked at her. The woman I'd loved for 8 years, who I'd planned a future with. We were supposed to start trying for a baby next year. Now I wondered if that had been another lie. Work what out? I asked quietly. The fact that you brought me here tonight, paraded me around in front of your colleagues who probably all knew, then snuck off with him while I played the fool downstairs. Michael straightened his shirt, his composure returning. If you had been a better husband, maybe none of this would have happened. Something inside me snapped. I crossed the room in 2 strides and grabbed him by the collar, slamming him against the wall. Awards and certificates rattled in their frames. Jack, stop! Sarah screamed. A better husband? I snarled in Michael's face. I gave her everything. I supported her career, celebrated her successes, loved her unconditionally. Michael's eyes widened with fear, but he still couldn't keep his mouth shut. I'll have you arrested for assault, he wheezed. I released him with a disgusted shove. Go ahead. I'm sure the board of directors would love to hear why I assaulted you. I stepped back, looking between them. You two deserve each other, I said, my voice cold. Expect divorce papers after the holidays, Sarah. Jack, please don't go, Sarah sobbed. We can fix this. I turned back one last time. Fix what? My trust? My dignity? The life we planned together? Some things can't be fixed, Sarah. I walked out, leaving them in their disheveled shame. The sound of the party grew louder as I descended the stairs. People were still laughing, drinking, celebrating. My world had just imploded, but the party went on. I made my way through the crowd, ignoring the concerned looks and whispered questions. Outside, the December air hit me like a slap. I pulled out my phone and called my brother James. Hey, can I crash at your place for a while? Of course, he said without hesitation. Everything okay? I looked up at the building where my marriage had just died. No, I answered honestly, but it will be. I hailed a cab and gave the driver my home address. I needed to pack some things before Sarah got back. As the city lights blurred past the window, I thought about all the signs I'd ignored. The late nights, the constant mentions of Michael, the way she'd grown distant over the past few months. I'd been such a fool. The house was dark when I arrived. Our Christmas tree stood in the corner, presents already arranged underneath. I wondered if any of them were from Michael. Moving quickly, I packed a duffel bag with clothes and essentials. In the bathroom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. I looked older somehow, like the last few hours had aged me years. My phone buzzed with texts from Sarah. I didn't read them. Instead, I took off my wedding ring and left it on the kitchen counter. 7 years of marriage, reduced to a small circle of gold on cold granite. James was waiting outside his apartment when I arrived. One look at my face told him everything he needed to know. Want to talk about it? He asked as we walked inside. Not tonight, I replied. He nodded, showing me to the guest room. Stay as long as you need, bro. I sat on the edge of the bed after he left, finally letting the events of the night sink in. My phone kept buzzing with messages and calls from Sarah. I turned it off. Tomorrow, I'd start figuring out how to rebuild my life. Tonight, I just needed to breathe, to process the fact that the woman I'd loved since college had betrayed me in the worst possible way. That the future we'd planned together was now just another lie in a marriage built on deception. I lay back on the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. Outside, snow began to fall. Christmas was less than 2 weeks away. I wondered how many other husbands had their lives fall apart during the holiday season. How many others had watched their wives laugh with their lovers at office parties. Sleep didn't come easily that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Sarah and Michael in that office. Heard their excuses, their attempts to blame me for their betrayal. By morning, my sadness had hardened into resolve. I knew what I had to do. The life I'd known was over. It was time to start writing a new chapter, one without Sarah, one where I wouldn't be anyone's fool. The sun rose over the city, painting the snow-covered streets in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new beginning, even if it wasn't the one I'd planned. The next few days passed in a blur of legal consultations and unanswered calls from Sarah. James let me work remotely from his place, understanding I needed space to process everything. You should read her messages at least, he suggested over coffee one morning. I shook my head, scrolling through divorce lawyer reviews on my laptop. What's there to read? More lies? More excuses? The truth was, I was afraid to read them. Afraid her words might weaken my resolve. 7 years of marriage doesn't just disappear overnight, no matter how badly it ends. Then came the envelope. No return address. Just my name typed neatly on the front. Inside was a bill for the office door I'd broken, along with a note from Michael. Consider this your first lesson in professional conduct, he'd written. The smug bastard actually expected me to pay for the door I broke catching him with my wife. I was about to tear it up when an idea struck me. Michael Anderson, the untouchable executive. The man who thought he could take whatever he wanted without consequences. Maybe it was time someone taught him a lesson instead. I spent the next few days researching his company. It wasn't hard to find information. They were one of the biggest marketing firms in the city. What interested me most was the ownership structure. Michael might have been a big-shot director, but he was still just an employee. The real power lay with the board of shareholders. One name kept coming up in my research: Lawrence Whitaker, a 70-something conservative businessman who'd helped found the company, known for his old-school values and zero tolerance for scandal. Perfect. I crafted my letter carefully, detailing everything that had happened at the Christmas party. Included screenshots from the video I'd recorded. Emphasized how Michael's behavior reflected on the company's reputation. 2 days later, I got a call from Whitaker's office. Mr. Whitaker would like to meet with you tomorrow at 10 a.m. The receptionist's voice was crisp, professional. He says to bring any relevant documentation. I smiled, thinking of the video on my phone. I'll be there. Whitaker's office was exactly what you'd expect from an old-money businessman. Dark wood, leather chairs, walls lined with awards and vintage photographs. The man himself sat behind a massive desk, studying me with sharp blue eyes. Mr. Thompson, he said, gesturing to a chair. Please sit. I took a seat, trying to look calmer than I felt. Your letter was disturbing, he continued. We pride ourselves on maintaining certain standards. I understand, sir. That's why I came to you. I pulled out my phone, pulled up the video. I think you should see this. Whitaker watched in silence, his expression darkening with each passing second. When it ended, he sat back, fingers steepled under his chin. How long had this been going on? I don't know for sure, I admitted. But looking back, probably months. He nodded slowly, like he was piecing something together. There have been rumors. Nothing concrete until now. He stood, walking to the window. Mr. Thompson, what exactly do you want from this? I thought carefully before answering. Justice, Mr. Whitaker. Not money, not revenge. Just justice. He turned back to me, something like approval in his eyes. Leave it with me. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and paperwork. Sarah finally stopped trying to contact me when the divorce papers were served. She didn't contest anything, probably hoping for a quick, quiet settlement. I heard through the grapevine that things at her office had changed. Internal investigations were launched. Meetings behind closed doors. Michael's confident strut had turned into a nervous shuffle. Then came the announcement. Michael Anderson had been terminated for violations of company policy and ethical standards. The severance package was minimal, his reputation in tatters. Sarah resigned the same day. I received another envelope from Whitaker's office. Inside was a check with more zeros than I'd expected, along with a note. Mr. Anderson's personal contribution to your fresh start. Use it wisely. I almost laughed at the irony. Michael's parting gift would help me rebuild the life he'd helped destroy. James noticed the change in me after that. You seem lighter, he said one evening. We were watching a basketball game, something normal in the midst of chaos. Justice has a way of lifting burdens, I replied. He nodded, understanding. You know you can stay here as long as you need, right? I looked around his apartment, grateful for the sanctuary it had provided. I think it's time I found my own place. The next day, I started apartment hunting. Something fresh, without memories of Sarah. A clean slate. I found a modern loft in a different part of the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows, exposed brick walls. Nothing like the suburban house Sarah and I had shared. Perfect. Moving in felt like stepping into a new chapter of my life. Each box unpacked was another piece of my old life sorted and dealt with. Some things I kept, others I donated. Our wedding album went into storage. I wasn't ready to look at it, but I won't bring myself to throw it away either. Time is a way of healing wounds, they say, but it also has a way of revealing truths we might have missed. Like how Sarah's ambition had slowly consumed her. How she'd changed from the woman I fell in love with in college. Or maybe she hadn't changed at all. Maybe I just finally saw her clearly. The winter melted into spring. I threw myself into work, took up running, started meeting friends again. Life went on, different, but not necessarily worse. Then one day, I saw her. I was grabbing coffee in my usual spot when she walked in. Sarah looked different somehow. Smaller, less polished. She saw me too, hesitated by the door. For a moment, we just stared at each other across the coffee shop. All those years together, reduced to an awkward moment between strangers. She took a step toward me, then stopped. I could see the conflict on her face. Want to talk? Don't want to talk? I made the decision for her, grabbing my coffee and heading for the door. As I passed her, she spoke softly. I'm sorry, Jack, for everything. I paused, not looking at her. I know, I replied. Then I walked out into the spring sunshine, let her stand there with her guilt and regrets. I had a life to live, a better life, one without betrayal shadowing every moment, one where I could finally breathe again. The city stretched out before me, full of possibilities. I took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. Somewhere in the distance, church bells were ringing. A new day, a new beginning, this time on my terms. Later that evening, I sat on my loft balcony, watching the sunset paint the city skyline. The encounter with Sarah had stirred up memories, but they didn't hurt like they used to. My phone buzzed, a text from James asking if I wanted to join him and some friends for dinner. A year ago, I would have declined, preferring to wallow in my misery. Now, I found myself typing sureware. Life had a way of moving forward, whether you were ready or not. I heard through mutual friends that Michael wasn't doing so well. His reputation was shot, and in our industry, reputation was everything. He'd taken a job at a struggling startup, a far cry from his executive suite. Karma, as they say, is a patient executioner. The restaurant was crowded when I arrived, full of Friday night energy. James waved me over to a table where several people were already seated. Jack, you remember Rachel from my office? I did remember her, tall, dark-haired, with kind eyes and an easy smile. She started working with James a few months ago. Of course, I said, taking the empty seat beside her. How's the new project going? Dinner turned into drinks, which turned into a long conversation. Rachel was smart, funny, and refreshingly direct. She'd been through her own divorce 2 years ago. It gets easier, she said, understanding in her eyes. Does it ever stop feeling like failure? She considered this, swirling her wine thoughtfully. One day you wake up and realize it wasn't a failure at all. No, no. It was a lesson, a painful one, but necessary. Her words stayed with me long after we said goodbye. The next morning, I went for my usual run in the park. The paths were crowded with weekend joggers and families. I was rounding the lake when I saw them. Sarah and Michael, walking together. They hadn't noticed me yet. They looked diminished somehow. Michael's designer suits had been replaced by casual wear. Sarah's confident stride was now hesitant. They were holding hands, but it seemed more desperate than romantic, like two drowning people clinging to each other. I ducked onto a side path before they could see me, not out of fear or pain, but because they simply didn't matter anymore. Their drama wasn't my story anymore. Back in my loft, I found myself looking through old photos on my laptop, not of Sarah and me, but from before, college days, family vacations. Pictures of who I was before I lost myself in a marriage built on lies. That guy was still in there somewhere. Maybe it was time to let him out again. I called Rachel that afternoon. Want to grab coffee sometime? Her smile was audible in her voice. I'd like that. We met at a small cafe the next day. No pressure, no expectations. Just two people sharing stories and laughter. It felt normal, healthy, the way things should feel. Weeks passed, then months. Rachel and I took things slow, both carrying our own baggage. But there was something refreshing about starting over with someone who understood, someone who'd been through the fire and emerged stronger. One evening, we were walking along the riverfront. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. Finding out the truth. I thought about that night at the Christmas party. The broken door, the shattered illusions. "No," I said finally. "The truth hurts, but lies destroy." She squeezed my hand, understanding perfectly. Summer turned to fall. The city transformed itself again, leaves turning gold and red. I got a promotion at work, moved to a bigger project. Life had a way of rewarding you when you stopped accepting less than you deserved. Then came another Christmas season. My company's holiday party was approaching. Rachel was my plus one this time. No drama, no secrets. Just two people enjoying each other's company. The venue was different, a rooftop restaurant with views of the city. As we stood by the railing, champagne in hand, I couldn't help but marvel at the difference a year makes. "Penny for your thoughts?" Rachel asked. "Just thinking about how life changes," I replied. "For better or worse?" I looked at her, really looked at her honest eyes and genuine smile, at the woman who'd helped me believe and trust again. Definitely for better. The party was winding down when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "W. As Sarah, I heard you're doing well. I'm glad. You deserve happiness." I showed the message to Rachel. "Are you going to respond?" she asked. I thought about it, then deleted the message. Some chapters are better left closed. The city lights twinkled below us, a mirror of the stars above. Rachel leaned her head on my shoulder. "Ready to go home?" I smiled, wrapping an arm around her. "Yeah, let's go home." As we walked to the elevator, I realized something. The past year hadn't just been about surviving betrayal. It had been about rediscovering myself, about learning that sometimes the worst moments in life lead us to the best ones, that trust, once broken, can be rebuilt, that love, real love, doesn't need to hide in shadows. The elevator doors closed behind us. Another chapter beginning. This time, I was ready for it. This time, I was writing my own story. And